Christmas Day was the last day Kirk Johnson spoke with his mother, former Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson.
She thought that she wouldn't live 3 weeks, and she did.
Congresswoman Johnson died New Year's Eve.
Just a nightmare that you wouldn't want anybody to have to go through.
That nightmare began September 21st, 2 weeks after the Congresswoman had back surgery. Kirk says he was supposed to meet with her caseworker at Baylor Scott & White Institute of Rehabilitation.
Before I got there, she had called me saying that she needed help. She couldn't get anybody to respond to the button that calls a nurse.
When he got there,
deplorable. She was being unattended to. She was screaming out in pain and for help.
Unfortunately, she was left in her own feces.
The family's attorney, Les Weisbrod, believes Johnson had been in that state for at least an hour. Kirk says he was able to track down the CEO of the facility and later that evening received this voicemail from the case manager.
My deepest apologies for the situation that Mom was in and that we couldn't find staff. There are no words, to be honest with you.
Kirk says he was told his mother's tech was with another patient and other nurses were in training.
But I think it's ironic that for a registered nurse who is a member of the Academy of Nursing to have been treated that way.
The family's attorney says Johnson had to undergo additional surgeries, receiving antibiotics, cleaning out the infection, removing hardware from the initial surgery, and replacing it.
She knew what happened to her. We discussed it. And she asked me to pursue a case for her weeks ago.
Johnson's death certificate lists osteomyelitis, an infection of the bone, as the cause of death. Select Medical Holdings, who owns and operates the rehabilitation center, says they cannot comment at this time. The family has filed a pre-suit for medical negligence required by Texas law, which allows a 60-day waiting period to allow any resolutions prior to an actual lawsuit.
The options are limited due to the law. Congresswoman was against that law, but she was going to stand up for her rights.
Now others are standing in her place.
If this prevents this from happening to one other person, then that would be what she would have wanted.
A legacy, continuing to fight for change. In Dallas, I'm Brittany Moncrief.
This afternoon, Baylor Scott & White Health released a statement saying, quote, Congresswoman Johnson was a longtime friend and champion in the communities we serve. She is an inspiration to all. We're committed to working directly with the Congresswoman's family members and their counsel. Out of respect for patient privacy, we must limit our comments. You know, Johnson was an iconic lawmaker who represented North Texas for more than 30 years.
Yeah, our senior political reporter, Jason Whiteley, immediately reached out to other lawmakers, and you're here now to give us more context.
This came as a surprise to everyone when the news came down this morning here. You know, this is really one of those cases that is very likely to end in a settlement. With the evidence we heard today in the story you just saw there, attorneys tell me it is doubtful something like this is going to go to trial. Obviously, companies do not discuss potential litigation, so we're not getting the other side of this from Baylor Scott & White. But Eddie Bernice Johnson's friends are talking about her final days. We reached EBJ's successor, Congresswoman Jasmine Crockett, in Washington, D.C. this afternoon. Crockett said the last 4 months of Johnson's life were anything but pleasant.
Essentially, the Congresswoman went in for a procedure and for all intensive purposes, never really came out of the hospital. Most people don't know that she didn't walk after this and that she really was bedridden. And right before she passed, that's when they finally had sent her home. But this surgery took place in September. And so for approximately 3 months, this is kind of what she was going through.
You know, the irony here is that Eddie Bernice Johnson was a nurse, the very first nurse ever elected to Congress, and she spent 30 years there advocating to improve health care. To now have this final chapter written today, just days before she is buried, is quite surprising and ironic. to say the least.
We heard there from Congresswoman Crockett. Have you heard from any other lawmakers?
We've heard from several of them, Chris. State Senator Royce West had a lot to say. He was very direct in his reaction to what happened. He looked directly in the camera this afternoon and had a message for Baylor Scott and White. We'll share that with you tonight at 10.
All right, we'll see you then, Jason. Thank you. And the community will be able to pay their respects to former Congresswoman Eddie Bernice Johnson beginning Monday. A public viewing will be held in the Hall of State at Fair Park, and it will be followed by a prayer service at Concord Church Monday night. Johnson's funeral will be held Tuesday morning at 10. She will be buried in Austin on Wednesday.